Good morning, guys. Good morning. It's another beautiful day in Honolulu, Hawaii. Oh boy. So just yesterday, I was talking to one of my coworkers, right? And she told me that our newest coworker, who just started working here a few weeks ago, she told me that they were talking and he told her that he's a Jehovah's Witness. And I said, is that so? Is that so? So part of me was like, Jerron, you know what? Don't say nothing. He's a part-timer. He's only here for a few days a week. If you say something, he may feel awkward. He may end up quitting the job because you're I'm what a Jehovah's Witness would call an apostate, right? Because I speak out against the religion. So I said, if I engage with him about this religion, he may feel a certain way. He may end up quitting the job, and if he ends up quitting, I'm gonna have to take on his load because I'm the supervisor. Well, I'm one of the supervisors here, right? I'm one of the supervisors. So I said, is it worth me saying something? Is it worth me picking up additional workload if this guy ends up quitting because he feels uncomfortable working with a quote-unquote apostate? Right? So I was debating whether if I should say something or not yesterday. And I finally gave in. I said, Jerron, you know what? Maybe he's here for a reason at the job. Maybe you and him were destined to cross paths because, maybe he's destined to wake up in the future. Who knows? But I said to myself, what are the odds of a Jehovah's Witness working, a new employee who happens to be a Jehovah's Witness working on my shift while I'm supervisor at the job, right? So I finally gave in. I said, Jerron, you know what? Just be subtle. Try to pick his brain, see what happens, right? So at the end of the shift yesterday, I said to him, I said, oh, I heard that you're a Jehovah's Witness. And he said, yeah, I've been, baptized for 3 years now. I said, oh, so you're fairly new in the organization, right? And he goes, yeah, I've been studying for about 5 years altogether. 2 years before he got baptized. He was studying, and he's been a devout baptized publisher since 2022, just 3 years ago, right? So I said, okay, cool. And he goes, why you ask? He said, are you affiliated with the Jehovah's Witnesses? I said, I actually was born and raised in that religion, and I just left some years ago, a few years back. And he goes, oh, really? He goes, what happened? And he said, if you don't mind me asking, what happened? I told him, I said, you know what? There's been quite a lot of discrepancies. I didn't go into the whole CSA cases and how Jeffrey Jackson lied under oath. I wanted to say that, right? But I don't want to be too... I did not want to give him too much information all at once. I don't want to overwhelm him, right? But you guys know I am blunt. I'm direct. I hate to beat around the bush, right? So I told him, I gave him a little taste as to why I left. I said, I left because there's, quite a few discrepancies. And I said to him, this religion is no longer the religion that I grew up in as a witness. Now, me and him, we've pretty much living complete opposite lives. I was born and raised in in the Jehovah's Witness religion, right? I was born and raised in it, and I left later in life. He was not born and raised in this religion. In fact, he told me he's the only person in his family who's in this religion. He told me he was in the military. He gave up the military life to become a witness. And I think he's in his late 20s, early 30s, right? If I had to guess. I would say anywhere from 28 to 33. He's in that age range, right? And like I said, me and him, completely different. He was not born and raised in this organization, and he found the religion later on in life. I was born and raised in it, and I left later on in life. So I said to him, you believe in the Bible, right? And he goes, of course. I couldn't hold back for talking about the governing body leaders. So I said to him, if you believe in the Bible, right? Why do you feel like you need to listen to your leaders? And he said, back in the day, wasn't the organization run by the apostles, right? He said there was always leaders in this organization. So when he brought up the apostles, I said, hold on, but the apostles was led by Jesus. Jesus was perfect. Jesus was a perfect man leading the apostles, the quote unquote organization, right? And he had nothing to say, right? Then I said, who's leading the governing body leaders? I said, if back in the day Jesus was leading the apostles, keep in mind Jesus was a perfect human being, so he gets a pass. You know, no, he's the only person on the face of this earth who he's the only person who walked on the face of this earth who gets a pass, because Jesus was a perfect human being. And I also said to him, the governing body leaders, they are imperfect. And I had to remind him that coming from the governing body leaders' own mouth, they said they are not inspired, they're infallible, they make mistakes. So I said to him, if they are not inspired by God, if they are not communicating with God, why do you feel obligated to follow these men? And he didn't have much to say, right? And then I brought up, Malachi 3:6, which talks about God does not change. God remains the same all the time, all day, every day. So I said to him, if God doesn't change, how come there's so many changes with this religion? If God doesn't change, the governing body leaders of Jehovah's Witnesses, they're supposed to mimic Jehovah. But God doesn't change. How come there's so many changes? Then, when I said that, then he brought up, the light is getting brighter, and that's why there's clarifications. That's why things are constantly changing, because God is giving them the answer and whatnot. And I said to him, I said, bro, you're saying the light gets brighter. But once again, that contradicts Malachi 3:6 that says God does not change. And also, if the light is getting brighter, where's this information coming from if the governing body leaders of Jehovah's Witnesses are not inspired by God? Where's this information coming from? How do they come out with new light if they're not communicating with God? Right? So I said to him, I said, I understand that when people speak out against a religion, especially people like me, right? Because me and him, I was reading his body language, his demeanor, his facial expressions, and I was trying to see if he was like going to back away, because I kept talking about the governing body leaders, right? And he was very open-minded. He was very respectful. Now, most Jehovah's Witnesses would be like, whoa, you speaking negative about my religion. I don't want to hear this. Let's not talk about this anymore. A lot of Jehovah's Witnesses would say that, right? Me and him was talking for about a good 10, 15 minutes. And like I said, he was very open-minded, very, very respectful, and we both was exchanging ideas. Because I wanted him to see that, you know what? Yes, I'm speaking out against this religion. However, I am not a bitter, angry, quote-unquote apostate. I said to him, I'm thinking critically, I'm thinking open-mindedly, and I said to him, I don't want you to waste your life on this religion. And I said to him, bro, keep in mind that Jehovah's Witnesses have been waiting for paradise for 150 years. And I reminded him that there have been plenty of Jehovah's Witnesses that was born and raised in this religion, and they sadly died waiting for paradise. So I said to him, if paradise doesn't come in the next 50 plus years, if you live to be 80 or 90 years old and paradise is still not here, would you be okay with that? And he said, you know what, I'm all right with that. He said, because I have my brothers and sisters. He said, I have a whole bunch of people in the Kingdom Hall and the organization, people that show me so much love. That's what he said. And I said, okay, I respect that. If that's how you feel. But I said, you also have to keep in mind that even though you feel like these brothers and sisters in your congregation, you feel like there's a lot of love, right? But I said to him, can you ever tell these witnesses that you having doubts? Can you tell these witnesses that things are not adding up with this religion? Can you have a heart-to-heart? Can you be 100% real and raw with the witnesses, with the brothers and sisters in your congregation. I said to him, if you expressed to them that you had doubts, if you told them that you no longer believe, all the love that you're receiving right now will be out the window. I said to him, me and him, we had a heart-to-heart. I said, that's exactly what happened to me. I said, the minute that I expressed doubts and concerns to my Jehovah's Witness family and friends, they shun me. And I said, bro, what you are receiving at the Kingdom Halls is called love bombing. I said, yeah, they are expressing quote-unquote love to you, if that's what you want to call it. But I said, the minute you stop going to the meetings, the minute you tell these witnesses that you no longer believe in their belief, all that love is out the window. Therefore, it's not real love. It's not real love. It's called love bombing. That's what they're giving to you, bro. That's what they're showing to you. But it's not love. It's conditional. It's based on the fact it's based on if you go to the meetings, if you're out in service, if you're coming at the meetings, then they love you. The minute you stop doing all that, these people won't hear from you ever again. Right? And then I brought up the service, and he told me he's an auxiliary pioneer. So I said, bro, I want you to think about this. What I'm about to tell you, I want you to really, really think about this the next time you're out in service. I said, what is the point of preaching if Jehovah God, if he really wanted everyone on the face of this earth to make it to paradise, if God's objective was to save humanity, and there was a paradise that was right around the corner, why would a loving God have Jehovah's Witnesses pioneering for hours and hours? Especially here in Hawaii, it's scorching hot, and it's humid in the summertime here. It's extremely humid, right? So I said to him, why would a loving God have human beings, his children, out in a burning, scorching sun for hours and hours, preaching, whether you're doing door knocking, letter writing, phone witnessing, standing in front of the car? Why would he have Jehovah's Witnesses waste hours and hours of their precious time when he could just easily express to the whole world, and every tongue, every language, every nation, every country around the whole world at the same time? I am Jehovah, the true God. I want everyone to know me. I want everyone to get to know me because I have a new world for everyone. Please get to know my people. Please get to study with Jehovah's Witnesses. I am Jehovah, the true God. I said to him, imagine if God did that. If God's voice was heard all over the earth. Wouldn't that be more effective towards saving people's lives, instead of you being an auxiliary pioneer, wasting your precious time knocking on people's doors, standing in front of cars? For what? I said, bro, think about that. If God's objective was to save humankind, why can't he just say it from, why can't he just use his own voice to wake people up and help them to see that he is the true God and this is the true religion? Why have people out in service for hours and hours wasting their precious time? And he was like, you know what, that's a good point. But he shrugged his shoulders and he's like, I don't know why that's not the case. And I said, bro, I know you're taught that people like me, ex-witnesses, were, wicked, evil, mentally diseased apostates. But I said, I'm trying to help you to think critically. I said, you are free to continue to do your studies with Jehovah's Witnesses. You're free to do all your, attend all your meetings. You're free to look at jw.org, right? You're free to live that lifestyle if you want to. I said, however, as a Jehovah's Witness, you are not taught to think critically. You're not taught to be open-minded. And then I brought up 1 Thessalonians 5:21, which says to test all things. So I said to him, bro, if 1 Thessalonians 5:21 is encouraging you to test everything, test all things. Don't just believe blindly, test it out. So I said the governing body leaders is telling you one thing. They're telling you everything else outside of jw.org is false. This is Satan's world. Don't listen to ex-members. Don't be open-minded. But the Bible is saying something else. And then I gave him a little demonstration. I said, bro, imagine if you was married and you wanted to look at you wanted to use your wife's phone for whatever reason, right? And right away, your wife gets defensive. She goes, no, don't look at my phone. Don't touch my phone. Don't, there's nothing on it. There's no need to look at my phone. Don't look at my phone. I said, bro, imagine if your wife got all defensive if you wanted to look at her phone. You wanted to use her phone for whatever reason, right? And then she got defensive right away. I said, wouldn't that be a red flag? Wouldn't you get a little, wouldn't you be a little wary and cautious? Wouldn't you be wondering to yourself, hold on, what does she have to hide if she's so defensive towards me using her phone? And he said, yeah, you're right, I would be. He said, if my wife was like that and I wanted to use her phone, I would be curious, like, whoa, what don't you want me to see? I said, exactly. So I said, if you supposedly have the truth, why are your leaders, why are the governing body leaders of Jehovah's Witnesses, why are they scared for you to look outside of jw.org if you have the truth? That doesn't make any sense. That doesn't make any sense. And he had nothing to say. You know? And you know what? I might have been a little too much, but I said, you know what? maybe he was destined to come to my job for a reason. Maybe me and him was destined to have that conversation for a reason. You know, hopefully I planted some seeds so the next time he's out in service and standing in front of a cart, maybe he can contemplate everything that we've spoken about. Like I said, me and him was only speaking for 10, 15 minutes. We didn't speak for long, right? I don't want to be, I don't want to come across, I don't want to come across too strong, but I also wanted to make a point. I wanted to help him to see that, you know what, bro? There is nothing wrong with thinking critically. There is nothing wrong with being open-minded. Especially when your leaders are telling you to only listen to them, and then that's exactly what witnesses do. Then they turn around and say, oh, we made a mistake. We need to clarify things regarding beards. We need to clarify things regarding toasting. We need to clarify things regarding secular education. And that's something else that me and him spoke about. We spoke about secular education. I said, bro, why are your governing body leaders telling Jehovah's Witnesses to now go to college, to now go to school, if the end is right around the corner? I said to him, does that make sense? And he said, well, times are hard. Jehovah's Witnesses a lot of them are struggling. A lot of them are living in poverty. So they need school. They need to go to college. They need, better education. And I said to him, you was not raised in this religion. I was. He just got baptized 3 years ago. I said, now, all my life as a Jehovah's Witness, we were told secular education is forbidden because paradise is going to happen any day. Paradise is going to occur any day now. It's going to happen any day now. So I said, why are your leaders telling Jehovah's Witnesses to invest 4 to 8 years in secular education if paradise is so imminent? If paradise is really supposed to happen, if paradise is right around the corner, why would the leaders encourage Jehovah's Witnesses to pursue secular education, which takes 4 to 8 years to graduate, sometimes longer than that? I was trying to help him to see that the governing body leaders of Jehovah's Witnesses, what they say and what they do, two complete different things. They contradict themselves all the time. I make sure I use my time wisely because for some reason I felt like I said, oh boy. After the conversation, I said to myself, oh boy, Jerron, you can't, I think you came across a little, you might have come across a little too strong, but at least I was blunt. At least I helped him to see that, you know what? The Bible says one thing, but your leaders are saying something else. And at the end of the day, me and him, we both agreed that at the end of the day, you should follow the Bible, not mere men, because men make mistakes. Men are imperfect. I really wanted him to see that. Actually, he said this. He's the one who said this. He said, at the end of the day, it should be about God and your personal relationship it should be about the Bible and your personal relationship with God. He said this, right? And I reminded him, I said, if that's the case, why are there millions of Jehovah's Witnesses listening to mere men, listening to the governing body leaders of Jehovah's Witnesses. Why? If you just need the Bible and a personal relationship with Jehovah, why listen to men who keep flip-flopping their doctrines? That doesn't make any sense. If they constantly get it wrong, why are you listening to them? I don't get that. So like I said, me and him, we had a really, really good conversation. And it's ironic how I'm his supervisor. The quote-unquote apostate / XJW is a supervisor for Jehovah's Witness, And as time goes by, I want him to see that, yeah, I'm an ex-member. I'm speaking against this religion. However, I am not bitter. I treat him no differently from everybody else at the job. I treat everybody the same. So hopefully my actions can help him to see that ex-members are not the bitter apostates, evil, wicked, mentally diseased apostates that witnesses make us out to be. And hopefully he will take into consideration everything that we've spoken about. Because I was bringing up points from the Bible, not from my personal perspective, but from the Bible. Malachi 3:6 says, I am God, I do not change. And 1 Thessalonians 5:21 says to test everything. And I show him that scripture. I said, bro, you see this word, right? It says test everything. Test all things out. Don't just listen to JW at all. Be completely open-minded. I was trying to help him to see that. So, this guy, he has a really good heart. He seems like, he has pure good motives. So hopefully he'll, read between the lines and see this organization for what it is. But I really enjoyed talking to him, and I'm happy that he allowed me to freely talk to him. Like I said, me and him, we both was going back and forth. We both was extremely generous, extremely polite. We listened to each other. We didn't argue, none of that. We had a heart-to-heart conversation for a good, 10-15 minutes. Anyway, guys, I'll keep you guys posted as time goes by. Hopefully he doesn't quit. Because I know some witnesses, it could be a bit overwhelming when you work with an ex-witness. But, he took the time to talk to me, and I appreciate that. I really do. Anyway, guys, I'll keep you posted as time goes by. Hope everyone is doing well. I'll see you guys on the next one. Take care.